everyone on Twitter or X or everyone over the weekend has been talking about this Bellular video. WoW's actual sub count. WoW stopped releasing the sub count data, I think, in Warlords of Draenor. Correct me if I'm wrong, or was it start of Legion or something? I think around that era. And since then, there's been a lot of speculative reports on where the actual sub number is. Obviously, the peak was around Wrath of the Lich King, close to 15 mil. We saw an increase throughout Vanilla, TBC up to Wrath, and then Kata petered out, and then kind of a resurgence in MOP, then a continual decline since then. We don't really know the live numbers since then, though, because Blizzard stopped reporting. This video maybe gets to the bottom of that, so I'm really curious what it has to say. Let's take a look, Bellular.
I'm going to be presenting information that details World of Warcraft subscriber trends.
Okay.
This is real data from a Blizzard presentation that took place at GDC this year. In fact, it took place like a day or two ago.
Okay.
Now, when doing a story like this, talking about a thing that's kind of leaked out, it's got to be genuinely newsworthy, it's got to serve a public interest, and given that we are talking about World of Warcraft sub numbers, I think for the audience here, that is completely obvious. Now, this will be going public eventually. GDC talks always end up being available after the fact in the GDC vault, though often at a decent bit of a delay. Now, me saying this does make it all sound very serious, and in a way it is serious. We are dealing with hundreds of millions of dollars, but mostly, this is fascinating. This charts World of Warcraft's success, its downward trend. It even confirms its lowest point in modern history. Do you want to know when WoW is at its worst? You're going to
Probably, if I had to personally guess, I would, for me, it was Warlords of Draenor. Maybe I'm a bit biased. I have enjoyed expansions after WoD more than WoD. WoD, to me, I quit twice for like many months at a time. I couldn't stand it. It was just terrible to me. I'm not reading chat. I'm not going to read chat because you guys have seen this video, and I haven't seen this video yet, but my guess would probably be around Warlords. Like, to me, that just sucked. Legion, to me, felt like a massive step up, and then some more recent expansions I had my issues, but it still felt a little better. To me, WoD seemed kind of rock bottom, but let's take a look and see.
find that out today. And
Okay.
we even have an internal breakdown of why the Shadowlands expansion failed. And by the end of this analysis, you will have
Maybe I'm
the
wrong.
most accurate possible subscription number that can be done right now, and a subscription number for right now. We will also know WoW sub numbers for its worst periods of health, and we'll be able to compare our workings out to Blizzard and Activision Blizzard's prior statements. I cannot wait to get into this, and if this kind of thing is tickling your brain, getting it whirring, I think you'll love today's sponsor. Boot.dev, their mission is to teach you back-end web development, which is an amazing skill, and in this
that's
case,
actually kinda cool.
using Python and Go, and they'll of course be doing it the smart way by making it fun. Boot is an online self-paced platform 100% designed to get you writing tons of code, and not just any code, because by working through RPG game-inspired problems, well, it's actually fun, and it leverages things you already know. Boot itself has got quests, levels, XP, and achievements to keep it addicting, and you can even get 25% off your first purchase using my link and code. They have an incredible...
That's actually kind of cool. Like, just learn it. Instead of going to school, you just learn online, easy clap, get a job. It actually seems like a decent strat in 2024, or it seemed like a real decent strat maybe in 2018 even. But yeah, not bad.
Very complete and in-depth learning path that also leverages the things that we like, with roleplay being woven through the courses. Things like developing and deploying a Pokedex, learning object-oriented programming concepts by working through RPG combat examples. Basically, it's an approach that is leveraging the understanding you already have to help those concepts click and to keep it fun. And what's around the learning matters as well, be it their Discord community, their open communications with their monthly posts, the boot.dev beat, which keeps you in the loop with new content. As an example, they've this month shipped upgraded weekly streaks as a feature. There are community boss battles, so that's also cool. And yeah, there you'll see all the comings and goings of the platform. It's just a really awesome package, and you can check them out today at boot.dev/Bellular, where code Bellular gets you 25% off your first purchase.
Dope.
And that's backed by a no questions asked 30-day money-back guarantee, where they've got free demos of all of their courses. So, cheers, Boot, and let's roll. First, we've got a graph of subscribers. This is something we've not got in a decade. Blizzard stopped reporting them during Warlords of Draenor because...
Wait, hold on. Let's move the camera out of the way and try to understand what we're looking at here. So this is 2016. Wait, what am I actually looking at? So, okay, so these are modern expansions. Legion, okay, BFA, classic 2019 launch, of course. We don't have the vertical axis. We don't know how many millions this is. Okay, presumably this is like 6 or 7 million or something. Shadowlands came out. TBC seemed to go down a bit. Yeah, and then this seems like about what we might expect. Legion was pretty decent, but you know, closer to when there's no content, people quit. BFA comes out, people quit really fast. Classic comes out, people quit pretty quickly, but you know, there's still a player base that stuck around. Shadowlands came out, which was hype again. It was actually really hype on release, then people quit. Makes sense. TBC came out, people didn't seem to be that interested. Kept quitting. Wrath came out, people played for a little bit, but like not super long. And then Dragonflight came out, and it goes up, which is historically true. And then now it's probably going back down. But then SOD came out, so yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, this seems about right.
Yeah, the sub numbers went down pretty damn big. Anyway, you see the numbers be pretty good for the launch of Legion. We see Legion lose players, then flatten out. BFA bumps us up, but not by as much as I thought, to be honest. But immediately after BFA, we do see awful months. And what we're actually looking at here is a rolling average of World of Warcraft subscribers.
So I made a video over the weekend. It was called like, can WoW be saved? And I think if you've watched that video, you understand my perspective on these dips, so to speak, right? I talked about generational interest and how that works with players and their time. And it makes a lot of sense for an expansion to come out and for people to quit after. It makes actually perfect sense. In fact, it makes so much sense that like that's pretty much exactly what we're going to see, even if the expansion is good. Even if the expansion is good, we're going to see a decline after an expansion because people can't put their time in and dedicate their time as 30 to 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds, however old a lot of the WoW generation is. If you haven't seen that video, go check that video out. Why can WoW be saved? I uploaded over the weekend. It goes into depth on that topic.
It does not get any more real than that. Now, at the time of Classic's launch, we heard that it just about doubled WoW subs, and this graph absolutely does back that up. Classic then was clearly helping as we were moving into Shadowlands, of course, given the pandemic. It just did incredibly well, but that was followed by crippling failure. And when we zoom in, we see the unbroken line is the actual subs, the dashed line is the expected subs. You can see Shadowlands dropped like a rock, and unlike Legion and BFA, Classic existed during those initial quarters of Shadowlands. And looking at this, you may think the TBC and Wrath Classic didn't help much. Remember, TBC, Wrath Classic, and regular World of Warcraft all show the same subscription. So even if TBC was doing pretty decently, that could very much be cancelled out by the...
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so like the end of Shadowlands, we have a sub number here. The end of BFA, we had a similar sub number, right? Maybe a little bit lower, but like similar. The difference is in Shadowlands, you have your subs split between Classic Era and Wrath of the Lich King. And Shadowlands, that same sub number, close to that same sub number, is split between 3 different servers, right? Classic Era, TBC, or then turned eventually to Wrath, and Shadowlands, which is retail. Whereas in BFA, this was pre-Classic Era, and you had this amount of players, similar to this, all on retail. All of the player base on retail here. So even though there was a bit lower of a player base in BFA, everyone was playing one version of the game at that same subscriber count, versus here, we have it split up. That's an interesting thing to think about.
The performance of Shadowlands. And of course, it's very much not a surprise when we see this labeled as historically high churn. Yeah, we all knew that. The difference here is we're hearing it from Blizzard directly. Now, next, here's another slide for us to look at, and this one gets really interesting. This is a breakdown of why Shadowlands didn't work in their estimation. They say afterlife setting wasn't accessible, new antagonist wasn't developed, well-known story heroes were diminished. I mean, does that match how Shadowlands felt to you? Certainly does for me. And this, remember, straight from the horse's mouth, is the closest that we will see to Blizzard just saying straight up, this whole thing was a mistake, we shouldn't have done it, we ruined our iconic heroes, the villain sucked. As for gameplay, they say it lacked variety, borrowed power was wearing thin, systems were not evolving, and that I get, they were just iterating the same thing again and again and again. And when we think about variety, I mean, hey, 16 months in the Sanguine Depths, does that sound good to you? Vitally, they call out community specifically, saying gaps in content, lack of transparency, didn't feel heard. I mean, it's all shit that we said, right?
Yeah.
But this is great. And look, from what I could glean, a lot of Team 2 members were not happy at this period of time. There's a phrase I could say referring to some cliques, but I will not say it because it would be revealing and that would be irresponsible. But that kind of thing was going on. And another side is there has actually been quite a lot of staff turnover since the Shadowlands. Anyway, TLDR, it was a little bit of a shit show, and I think that absolutely did show in their public communications. The question then for us is, does the contents of this slideshow feel like it's been internalized by the team? I mean, literally, in some ways. Game-wise, I very much think so. The state of core class design is better than it's been in years. Mythic Plus is at an all-time peak. I've got a report coming out on that next week. By the raw numbers, it is literally the best it has been through all of this current WoW expansion.
Really?
But
wow.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's go back to some numbers.
That's surprising.
So we're taking
Wow.
a look at the launch of Dragonflight, and that must have been a terrifying thing for them. Its launch did not bring them back to their earlier Shadowlands numbers. That is dire, and it reflects an abnormally weak marketing campaign, one of their worst expansion cinematics, and an expansion that felt almost unexciting by design, which I kind of understand. How can you have a massive villain arc right after you've tried to pull the jailer? Right after you've wheeled out developers to claim in marketing materials that the jailer's demise is in fact the closing of a book that began in Warcraft 3. That was completely insane. And feature-wise, it didn't have any insane hyper-marketing feature like artifact weapons. And there was even mismatch with audience expectations with the new race. The Drakthir were a take on playable dragonkin that were nothing like what Warcraft as a franchise had led people to desire or expect.
Right.
But for all of that, and indeed because of some of that, it did focus on the essentials. Class design, talents, public events, basic traversal, content cadence. Let's see then what investing in those core foundational things actually gets you in your game. Looking at the Dragonflight sub numbers, we see that initially pretty mid, actually.
Okay. This is fascinating. Dragonflight launches here, and now WoW's coming up. So basically, what I'll see what Bellular has to say, but from me looking at this graph, to me, this is more like a Dragonflight failure, and WoW's being carried, hard carried by Classic Hardcore, by Season of Discovery, now by Plunderstorm, and the expectance of Cataclysm, and all of these other things. WoW is literally being carried by everything else at this point. Like, to me, that's what I'm reading here. Dragonflight comes out, people aren't that excited, but all this other stuff, people are like, yeah, that's what I'm seeing. Here, let's see what Bellular has to say, though.
The initial content seemed to do okay. Not amazing. It clearly did have a lower churn rate than what we would have expected. But where things get wild is mid-2023 and beyond. So what happened? Well, Classic Hardcore, both unofficial and official, kicked off. There was a revamp of gearing in modern WoW, and that I cannot overstate the importance of, because for so many people, gear literally makes them go and play the game. So yeah, fix up gearing, people start playing more. Surprising. BlizzCon then was huge. It got the vibes right, and instead of a woohoo, happy trailer, we got something with meat, with emotional depth, with compelling vocal performances, amazing animation, industry leading, and of course, Season of Discovery, which was launched quite shortly after. You would be forgiven for assuming that this spike is all Season of Discovery, but some numbers suggest that's not all the case. As an example, we've just published our report of Mythic Plus activity to our members and our analysis of Night Stalker's numbers. That'll be up on the channel next week. The core thing, though, is that Season 3 of Dragonflight, in terms of the number of runs done, is demolishing Season 1 and demolishing Season 2. And when we looked into
That's very unique, right? Normally, at least in activity in terms of PvP players, what you see is Season 1 is the biggest, always by far. Season 2 and 3, maybe not so much. And there's like a re-pickup for Season 4, and then the expansion ends. Like, that's something about what we would expect. And Season 1 being smaller than Season 2 and 3 is like... is really odd, in a good way, right? You're seeing stable growth. So maybe I'm wrong with my analysis that maybe it's all being carried by Season of Discovery and Hardcore. Further though, maybe it's not that wrong. After thinking about it for a second, I think a lot of players played Hardcore because it was what everyone was playing. And then when Hardcore stopped being fun, they're like, oh, well, I have a WoW sub anyway. Let's check on my retail characters for a second here. Oh, this Dragonflight expansion ain't too bad. Let's play a little bit more. And then Season of Discovery comes out and it gets you to subscribe again. And then all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute. Let's check out retail since I already have an active sub here for a second. Oh, wait a minute. Retail's actually not that bad. And once again, that's probably their strategy with Plunderstorm, right? Let's sub for Plunderstorm. You see your retail characters literally there every single time you log into the game. And you have to fully download Dragonflight even just to log into Plunderstorm. You log into Plunderstorm, you see your retail characters just looking at you, eyeing you every damn time you open the client. And then one day you click on that character, log in, and boom, they got you for another couple months, right? And that might be the strategy we see going forward, which might mean it's a massive L for Plunderstorm, because it might mean Plunderstorm's not going free to play, which makes me a bit sad, because I would love it to go free to play. But hey, if it's a strategy that's working for Blizzard to actually increase that graph besides just an increase from releasing expansions, then they have an alternative strategy that's actually seemingly working. That's pretty enticing.
To raid statistics, we've been seeing retention numbers that are essentially unparalleled in recent history. Pretty interesting. This slide then draws us a few points of comparison. Right now, World of Warcraft has as many subs as it did partway through the classic spike back in the days of BFA. It's just shy of Shadowlands' flash in the pan, and it actually looks as strong as Legion. Does it feel like that, though? Does the community feel like that? The answer is no, and there are many reasons, but a big one is fragmentation.
Yep, they're split.
Classic, Season of Discovery, and Modern have all got different player bases.
Yeah, that's a really, I mean, we just talked about that a second ago, but like the line here, if you like drag it back, is like similar to Legion, it's similar to Classic. The difference between Legion and now is Legion had all of the player base on Legion. Now we have it split between Hardcore, Classic Era, Wrath, Season of Discovery. Still, there's Dragonflight, of course, and then Plunderstorm. Like, the player base, the sub numbers are similar, but the player base, when you log into retail, is way different. And you can just tell when you log on and open your real ID or something. Like, it's way different. The subscribers are there, and it's working in that sense, but the player base just feels different, like way different.
Classic, Season of Discovery, and Modern have all got different player bases. We literally don't see each other. We don't watch the same YouTubers and watch the same Twitch people, right? So together, we're producing Legion-like subscription numbers, but it doesn't feel like that because we're actually logging into different versions of World of Warcraft. And that, I think, is an important factor. Modern World of Warcraft is, I think, very much on an upswing. But Modern WoW is still short of Legion, because Legion produced these numbers by itself, without a Season of Discovery, without a Classic.
Right.
But still, I truly believe it is on an upswing. Basically, what they need to do is the hard work and just making stuff. Look, Dragonflight was a great version of World of Warcraft, the game mechanics, brilliant. The types of play, the reward schema, massive improvements. But it was not a great representation of what Warcraft, the franchise, Warcraft the emotion is, Warcraft the world, the setting. It's no wonder that they are leaning into more core Warcraft things with The War Within, and why they are setting both Midnight and The Last Titan in fan-favorite continents. So clearly, Modern WoW, as a subset of World of Warcraft, has a long way to go, but I think is absolutely on the upswing.
Okay, let's take a look at the numbers.
And now it's time to talk about some numbers. Okay, we cannot do exact ones here, but we can try. Our last official number is 5.5 million. That was a few quarters after they plummeted from the Warlords of Draenor launch spike of 10 million. And guess what? Based on what they did say in prior earnings calls, we can get a workable subscriber number estimate for now that is basically as accurate as you can do. So, Warlords of Draenor's low was 5.5 million. When Legion launched, a misunderstanding with a journalist led to a number of 10.1 million subs being reported. Blizzard said that was false. They didn't provide a number though, but enter this, the Q1 2017 earnings report. So that's Q1 17. Legion released in Q3 the prior year, and this is what it says. Legion's overall performance is slightly ahead of the prior expansion. Now, this is obviously not perfect data, but, 2 to 3 quarters post-launch, WoD was about 5.5 million, so what is their definition of slightly? If it's only 5%, then that would put Legion at a similar point in its cycle at 5.8 million subscribers. If we take this as a starting point, we can have a lot of fun.
That's fair.
Okay,
I mean,
if we're at 5.8...
it might not be perfect, but like for the sake of where the numbers might be, it's fair. It's probably pretty decently close.
8 million 2 quarters after Legion launched, then you just draw a horizontal line, you see that we hit about 5.8 million with the launch of Guardians of the Dream. But since then, it's hard to say because the y-axis isn't labeled, but if you are to assume that the y-axis starts at 0 and you count 5.8 million in pixels, you work...
Assuming the y-axis starts at 0 is not a fair assumption at all. Like, if you... Yeah, no, absolutely not. Like, especially for doing like a PowerPoint presentation, I do not think that's a fair assumption to make. Right? Like, you see graphs all the time that are like, the first part of the graph is like 0 to 5 million, and then it shows where the graph is, and that's how you make misleading charts. And I'm not saying Blizzard's trying to mislead, but for the sake of the chart for the PowerPoint presentation, you didn't need the 0 to 5 million. I don't think that's necessarily a fair way to do that.
Work out a subs per pixel value, and then you do the maths, then we get 7.25 million subscribers right now, there and abouts. And yes, this is a rough estimate, but guess what? We'll be able to prove that the y-axis actually does start at 0. So, while this...
Okay, well, maybe I'm wrong. If the sub numbers are actually 7.25 million, that's... If you were to ask me how much I thought before watching this video, I probably would have said closer to 4 million. I probably would have said maybe 4 to 5. 4 to 5 million. Having said that, fragmented across all these game modes, not all just on retail, not 4 to 5 on retail, 4 to 5 across hardcore, era, wrath, retail, plunder, right? So it feels different, but still that is a massive W. If it's actually even close to that, that's almost double what I thought, to be clear, significantly more.
This is rough. I think you can see the fairly clear logic here, and at least it's a pretty damn good ballpark. But let's get a bit spicier. What were WoW's worst numbers? Well, 4.07 million, there and abouts midway through BFA, and during Shadowlands, even with Classic helping, 4.5 million. One thing that actually does make me feel good about these numbers is the scale though, because in the earnings call, again covering Classic's release, Blizzard said it was the sharpest growth in history and that they essentially doubled their subscribers. And if you go back to the annotated chart, you can see from 4.07 million to 8.27 million, which basically is a doubling. So I'm very confident that on that graph, yes, it's 0 on the y-axis.
Okay, maybe I'm wrong. That makes a lot of sense, because yeah, I mean, if they said they close to doubled and it seems to have close to doubled, maybe it's not perfectly at 0, but maybe the numbers do actually kind of add up. Man, we'll see. I mean, bro, if there's actually 7 million subs, I'm very impressed. I want this graph to be expanded. Maybe he does it at the end of this video for Classic, TBC, Wrath, Kata, Mob, and WoD. Right, the expansions pre-Legion, just to have a bigger picture, because I'm curious as to like the actual lowest points. Like, where was Warlords of Draenor in comparison to the 4 million number? I'm personally curious.
That is its starting point, and that I actually really do respect. A lot of companies will try to fudge with data by not labeling a y-axis or being a bit funny with it. That they really do seem to be just giving out the actual trends. That's honestly quite refreshing. So I suppose props to Holly and John. They evidently felt that actually they're in a strong enough feeling position that they can show this kind of thing. So that's the sub numbers, but there are other vital things, because for Blizzard, it's all about revenue per user. They use the store a lot more now than they used to. They pull future revenue forward using 6 and 12 month sub deals. But the thing is, WoW is probably over twice as expensive to develop. I mean, literally the headcount is like over, I think it's still over double what it was during Legion in like those earlier days, but our sub fees haven't risen. The expansion box prices went up, but not that much. So I think clearly the microtransactions like the cosmetics and the token, those are doing quite a bit of work. Because yes, ultimately the World of Warcraft team is, I think, just shy of 600 people. It really is quite massive, and that is far larger than it was at the past in, say, you know, the likes of Wrath of the Lich King. Wrath of the Lich King, it had a team that would look tiny compared to the current one. And of course, that's when they had 12.1 million subscribers. So that is basically it. I cannot wait for this talk to properly get out there so we can actually just break it down, go through all the detail. I think Holly and John doing a talk like this is really, really cool. Of course, at GDC, this is a case where they will be doing a presentation to fellow developers. Like, you don't just walk into GDC. Those tickets are pretty damn expensive. I should know because one of us is over there right now doing GDC things, working out stuff for our next project. Now, to be clear, he did not go to this talk. We learned about this through sources, shall we say. But knowing that this will be going public, not super far in the future, I kind of feel comfortable sharing it because I think especially right now, the community could probably benefit from just a general check-in on the numbers. And hey, who knows, maybe Holly and John will drop some interesting numbers in this presentation when we actually get our hands on it in the near future.
That'll be
that,
exciting.
though, is that. You now basically know what the subscriber trends, I mean, you know exactly what the sub trends have been for WoW since Legion. And you've got a fairly good idea of how many people are currently paying for a World of Warcraft sub. And that is something we have not been able to say in, well, pretty much a decade. That's kind of crazy. That's it.
That's pretty cool, man. That's definitely higher than I thought. Type 1 in the chat if that's higher than you thought. Type 2 in the chat if that's about what you thought. Type 3 in the chat if that's lower than you thought. I probably almost no threes. Yeah, it's definitely higher than I thought. A lot of people are saying in the WoW subreddit there is not classic WoW. Oh, I'm not okay, yeah, normal WoW subreddit probably, right? There's a graph that's filled in for the past expansions. Can someone link it? I don't know if I can. Oh, it's probably this. The release sub figures roughly plotted against the old ones. Cool. This is what I wanted to see. Okay. So at the start of the video, I took a random wild guess and I said the lowest point of WoW like presumably was Warlords of Draenor, which was here. That's definitely, so I was definitely wrong, like by a considerable margin. BFA was definitely considerably lower than the end of Shadowlands was also definitely considerably lower. I mean, this also was maybe the third lowest point, so there's something to be said there, I suppose. But yeah, no, we have I guess Legion even lower too. Legion, BFA, Shadowlands. Okay, wow, this is like definitely some really interesting scope. Definitely really interesting scope when you see it all like that. Once again, not perfectly accurate numbers, but maybe. Yeah, more subs than I thought. And man, to see us here at the end of Dragonflight, this is the first time we've seen an expansion launch and have the numbers actually go up, I think. Of course, TBC did. Of course, Vanilla did, because the game was still like new then, crabbing a new player base. I guess Wrath of the Lich King kind of did, and you could say the same thing, but Kata went down over time, Mist went down, WoD went down, Legion went down, BFA went really down, Shadowlands went down. Dragonflight is the first time we've seen an uptick mid-expansion, which once again, still, I think, has a lot to do with the hardcore hype, the Season of Discovery hype, and people then getting reinterested in retail after being reintroduced to WoW through these different means. I really think that's a massive part of it. Like a massive part of it. Because that's like the big difference here, right? We have these other ways of getting people back into the game. And then Plunderstorm, I'll be really interested to see with that. We have all these different avenues. And it seems like, I mean, I would love to know the numbers, and Blizzard probably will never release these, but the numbers of people playing Dragonflight versus Season of Discovery versus Wrath versus like Plunderstorm versus Classic Era. Because like, maybe I'm on some copium here. Maybe I am. and that's fine. I could be super off. I'm wrong about a lot of things. But I would be willing to bet if you add up Plunderstorm numbers, Season of Discovery numbers, Classic Era numbers, and Wrath, it's probably similar to retail. But yeah, it's a 4v1. But it's probably similar, maybe. Right? And once again, maybe I'm wrong. But if you think that they're somewhat similar, like Blizzard kind of just like doubled their sub numbers in a sense by putting all these different game modes out, which is, I mean, from Blizzard's perspective, a massive W. From the player base side of things, though, it feels a bit odd still to have such a division. It's probably even more. It's more, a lot more. Or no, retail's more. For sure, it's almost equal. Every time I bring this up, people call me crazy. But people call me crazy from both ends. People call me crazy that they think, oh no, Season of Discovery and Wrath and Era and all these different things have way more subs, way more active players than Dragonflight. And then people on the other side go, no, Dragonflight has way more active players than the other side. So people call me crazy from both sides, which probably means I'm probably just about right. Right? If people call you crazy from both sides, then you're in that middle ground and it's like, okay, perfect. Let's stay here. But yeah, no, I think even if that's somewhat true, still a massive freaking W for Blizzard. Cool. Well, thanks for linking the video. It makes me more optimistic for the future of WoW. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty darn cool.